Hello. Yeah, we are struggling with the technology, and it's got to the point where we think that we're not providing a proper standard of picture. Program content is well, that's a debate always. But we think that we're starting to get that right, and that Mirador is becoming entertaining as well as informative. But there's no point in having that if we can't get a decent picture to you and uninterrupted service. So after yesterday, when everything went wrong, I mean, terribly, terribly wrong, and I do not know how to fix it, we very much have decided to pause what we're doing for today and take a look and see what we can resolve and what we can't resolve. We're not getting very far with this at the moment, but then it could come in a rush towards the end of the day as we identify more ways of solving our problems. But we didn't want to leave you with a program day when you're expecting us. Some of you are expecting us. Some of you want us. Some of you can't wait to punch us in the nose. We would show you 3 or 4 of our older programs, ones that may be familiar to you, but it'll provide filling the gap, as it were, while you're waiting for us to come back, which hopefully will be tomorrow. And so for right now, with any luck at all, with our luck in the technology, here's a compilation of programs, and I hope that it all works. Well, wine, wine, no beer. Gracious as well. Not even going to talk about wine. I thought I was, but I've decided instead, and sometimes the nose for a nice drink steers you in a different direction, as indeed does a nose for a good story. I was going to spend just a minute or two talking about cocktails. Now I'm going to talk about them for several minutes. Because when I was researching cocktails to find out where they were nowadays, and I thought that they'd all but disappeared, even though one of my favourite tipples is a Bloody Mary, which properly made is indeed considered to be a cocktail. But as I researched and remembered some of the glory days, I also remembered a French journalist called Pierre Danineau, who in the 60s wrote a column for Le Figaro. And there's always been friendly banter between the French and the English about how they see us and we see them. They call us roast beef. I don't dare tell you what we sometimes call them. But the roast beef, Major Thompson, a character created by Pierre Danineau, was the typical English gentleman. He always was impeccably dressed in a suit, carried a brolly. Some places in the Western world it's known as a bumbershoot, and was carrying a briefcase in most instances, in which Danineau pointed to an invisible briefcase in which one could see a sandwich, which he said
every English gentleman carried for his lunch, and also a penny. A penny in old coins, I don't know, about half a cent, I suppose, half a euro, half a what. But anyway, half a new pence was carried because that's the amount that it took to put into the slot of the public toilet. So every English gentleman was always prepared. And Delano paints an incredible picture of the English gentleman. But in one of his books, and he wrote several about Major Thompson and about the English, he writes about Major Thompson going to New York and finding himself, and I suppose this would be in the 1960s, finding himself invited to a cocktail party. And as a good English gentleman, sort of more or less pines, what on earth is a cocktail party? Well, I was in North America in the 1960s, and I enjoyed many, many cocktail parties. They were the center of social existence, and people prepared very carefully not only the food that they would offer to their guests, but also what sort of cocktails. One of the vestiges of the cocktail circuit was a chain of cocktail bars, I suppose they were, but they were restaurant cocktail bars called Trader Vic's, and they were built in the image of a Polynesian war room, where the warriors would gather ready to go out and bash heads over any silly Englishman who dared to stand on their shores, and indeed they did do to various people, including Captain Cook. But these were stylized cocktail bars, and they had some exotic cocktails. They were a mixture of rum-based and fruit juice cocktails with wonderful names like a Wahine, a Molokai Mike, and the wonderful Scorpion. The Scorpion was a large bowl with a gardenia floating in the middle of this rum and fruit cocktail concoction. Each of the drinkers was given a straw, and you raced to see who could finish it. You didn't need too many of those throughout the evening to know that you'd been at Trader Vic's and you'd had a Scorpion. The other strange thing was that the bowl in which it came, there were 4 fertility figures, and it was almost impossible not to sort of pat them on the head. So I rather think that they helped the population explosion of the time. Nonetheless, that was the cocktail of the day. And cocktails were in such full flurry, such full flush. They were so acceptable in society that Esquire magazine and Playboy magazine put out books on how to make the perfect cocktail, but also 365 reasons to have a cocktail party. And the one I remember particularly was Jiffy the giraffe's birthday. And Jiffy the giraffe was an animal that had been secreted in one zoo or another throughout the world, but everybody was invited on a particular day to have a cocktail party to celebrate Jiffy the giraffe's birthday. Such was the grip of cocktails in those days. Not anymore. I woke up the other day and thought about cocktails, and I thought, yes, we still have them. You still see them advertised in pubs and bars, but the range and the wonder of the cocktail age has gone almost forever. Now, in researching this, I thought, in my halcyon days, I had my Wahines and the occasional Scorpion in Trader Vic's in Vancouver, in British Columbia. And I thought, I wonder what it was like. Do I remember it? So I looked up various pictures of the Trader Vic's cocktail bar in the Bayshore Inn in Vancouver. And sure enough, it flooded back with memories. But quite accidentally, I came across a newspaper article praising a very well-known local lady, Diane Forsyth Abbott. And she was pictured with a number of ladies, and she was a master of the art of making good banquets and dinner parties and so on, and had gained international recognition for that. And I looked and I thought, you know, that name rings a bell. So I did a bit more research, and sure enough, my good friend of many a year, David Kingsmill Abbott, had married her. I think she was about the fourth wife that he'd had, and I knew all of them. David was a great character, an Irishman. He once, when he was in Ireland and I was in Northern Ireland, turned up at the front door and said, Keith, I've made a mistake. I made a booking at a hotel and they haven't got any record of it. I've got the entire Irish athletics team with me. What can you do? So we spread the Irish athletics team out around many houses in the area and had half a dozen lying on my floor for the night. One was a trainee priest who fell in love with my daughter, which was not a very good thing for either of them, since priests were still, I suppose, supposed to not have sex and to be absolutely pure as the driven snow. Anyway, I've wandered a little bit off track because David would regularly hold court in the Bayshore Inn to have cocktails. We had many a good time, but he was recognized by the authority in British Columbia by being given a fellowship, a lifetime award for his contribution to broadcasting, not least of which is also to cocktail drinking. And I've got that little thing again which tells me that I'm running out of time, but nonetheless it's a good thing probably, because I've rabbited on for quite some time. And it's a strange way, I suppose, of talking about the cocktail. But cocktails are wonderful things, and I would hope that they might make a return. And that in remembering my good friend David Kingsmill Abbott, by seeing his picture with his wife, Diane Forsyth Abbott, and his daughter Ingrid in newspaper articles surrounding Trader Vic's, made me cast my mind back to different days when I was living in North America. The cocktail was king in North America. I'm not sure that it was ever king here. I'm not sure that it ever really caught on. But a cocktail is a cocktail is a cocktail, and they are marvelous things. So we had planned to talk about wine snobbery. Quite important. So many people are intimidated by going to parties where everybody seems to know what they're talking about when it comes to wine. 90% of them don't. It's just an effect. It's a way to show that they are rather superior to the people around them. So don't be intimidated, and there is a little trick that you can get around to fight back. And we were also going to have a little bit of a cricket, because many a day I have sat in the long room at many different county ground and England ground and had a drink, not necessarily a cocktail, while the innings was going on and wickets were tumbling and bowlers were having a field day. And so often happened in the 70s and the 80s. Not so much today. We're rather better at cricket than we were. But anyway, we will talk about wine snobbery, and we'll talk about cricket in our next program, which comes in a week's time. So I hope that you'll forgive my ramblings, but it just shows how you can start off with Pierre Danino and a column in Le Figaro about what an Englishman is in the eyes of a Frenchman, all the way through the cocktail circuit to Vancouver, British Columbia, where I suddenly rediscovered an old friend who unfortunately passed into the great cocktail bar in the sky in 2017, David Kingsmill Abbott. So please forgive me for my memories, and I'll see you soon. In the cocktail way, toodle pip, toodle pip. Hello.
Many people find commuting by train tiresome. But one of the pleasures of taking a train to London is that it passes through some of the most beautiful countryside in the UK. None more so than the view of the countryside as the line approaches Clayton Tunnel, just north of Brighton. The tunnel is the longest on the line, at 1.25 miles, running under the South Downs. Its unusual entrance is not the usual railway brick. It is instead designed to look like the gateway to a castle. On top is a cottage built for the railway's lightkeeper in 1849. The tunnel itself was opened in 1841 and the cottage added later. Idyllic. But after 1861 it became a nightmare, or at least for those who believe in ghostly goings-on. In August of that year, a night train left Brighton, travelling north to London. Partway through the tunnel, it stopped at what it thought was a danger signal from the lightman. The engine driver was correct. The railway official had indeed given a danger signal, but the train had rushed past him before pulling up. Thinking the train had cleared the tunnel, the unfortunate lightman gave the all clear to a following train. And it slammed into the back of the first train in the dark, killing 23 and injuring 176 more. It was the worst ever accident on the line. And people walking on the downs over the underground passage have reported hearing the screams of the passengers as the trains pile into each other. The line is now also a direct line from Lewes. I've travelled through that tunnel 1,000 times. I've never heard a scream other than the screech of the wheels and brakes. But I've never walked over the downs at that point either. And I turned down an invitation to stay in the cottage overnight. In fact, I get tense each time I go into the tunnel, knowing what had happened more than 165 years ago. But my fellow passengers carry on reading their newspapers, obviously oblivious to both the tragedy and the ghosts. I could sometimes scream at them. The ghosts of Clayton Tunnel. Eerie. Bloody eerie.
Good morning, peeps. We're back in Hailsham after 3 weeks. I've had a few issues going on with health and various other stuff, but back to full strength again now. Gardens are looking good. As you can see, the rain is here to help things grow. So our little perennial garden in Hailsham that we've been working on for the last few months is now really coming together. We've got enormous hollyhocks growing. The alliums are all out, cicerentiums. It's an absolute blast of life now, and we're still not in the main growing season. So another few weeks, it'll really come to life. I walk down through the garden, and you'll see there's a naughty dog hiding in the foliage as usual. But we'll have a stroll down here, and we'll have a look at the vegetables. So as you can remember, we planted courgettes and peas and sugar snaps in the outside bed. And as you can see, these have come on an absolute treat. So the courgettes are now flowering, and the sugar snaps and the peas are doing remarkably well. I'm very pleased. In fact, they're flowering as well. I'm just going to spin around at this low level and show you how the garden is looking. Look at that. That is a proper perennial garden. And as you can see, the theme of purple, white and green has been completely maintained. And actually, I'm really pleased with it. It's looking nice. Obviously, the second year, next year, it will look better. Gardens always come into their own once they've been in and they've established. But Bruce, who lives here, is doing a marvellous job. Excuse me, marvellous job of watering everything. I've just done some light weeding, and the ground is really soft. So he really has been watering, especially during that really hot spell we had. I'll just show you the greenhouse, because the greenhouse is also doing remarkably well. We've got a couple of cucumbers, which are also just flowering. Then we've got some chilies, some peppers, and then an array of tomatoes. Unfortunately, we did have a little bit of a disaster, and as you can see, my greenhouse here has no door. So I'm not actually able to keep it really warm, but it's not the end of the world, because during the really warm days you are meant to open the greenhouse, otherwise it can all start to, you can get too much moisture in there and things can rot. Joey, stop that. Things can rot and you can have problems. So it's not the end of the world, but it does mean that on obviously cooler days and days like this when it's raining, that you don't get the heat going in there. So our crops will be possibly later than some people. The reason why we have no door is because the storms that came earlier in the year basically blew the door off. It flew across the garden and shattered. So that was the end of the door, really. But yes, it's really coming together. I'm just going to show you this enormous hollyhock, which in a couple of weeks' time should have a prong of about 2 or 3 feet on top of beautiful. I think these are pinky purple, because I bought those to go with the white foxgloves, which you can see in the middle there. There is a white foxglove just coming up. The other foxgloves haven't actually flowered yet. Anyhow, just a short one today, because I'm just getting myself back into the swings of things. It's been a really busy few weeks. The gardening world is going crazy. It always does in May, June. Well, April, May and June are always the busiest times of the year. But we'll be back here next week. Hopefully by then we might even have some sugar snap peas and mange too that maybe could be picked and eaten. So that'll be where we are. Anyway, from Joey and I, have a good day. See you soon. Bye.
The life of a journalist, a nomad or a roamer or whatever you want to call me, can bring up some very interesting situations and some very interesting places. And strangely enough, one of the places that I remember very fondly is Kosovo. And I had a couple of experiences there that I thought were amusing. They certainly weren't at the time, but in retrospect, not bad. On one occasion, I was there training some journalists, and there was a kerfuffle outside the office window. And I saw that the police were surrounding a man who was waving a revolver, and they had batons in their hand. Perhaps not unreasonable in the circumstances. But one of the chaps that I was training was an American photographer, and he was busy snapping away. And the police spotted him and immediately made for him, and he bolted back into the office. The police poured in through the front door, and my office was on the second floor. And I went down the stairs and in a very brave way said, "Halt, who goes there?" Thinking that perhaps the gesture might worry them, as they were Kosovar police and I was as a Brit. And an English voice came back and said, "Who are you?" To which I responded, "Well, who are you?" And it turned out that these police were being trained by an English policeman. To which I said, well, if you're training these police and I'm training these journalists, you know very well that you cannot take a camera away from somebody in the street, except if you are suspicious that it affects national security. Other than that, you have no right to take a camera from people. He was a half-decent sort of chap, and we sat down and we resolved the issue. But in the meantime, my staff, seeing the police flood in, and Kosovo being Kosovo, where in fact the police had up until that particular time, post-war, in the early 2000s, had a considerable amount of power. And so they had rushed up the stairs and they had phoned General Agim Ceku. Ceku was a hero of the war with Serbia. He later became Prime Minister, and I believe today, is still a minister in charge of the armed forces. But I got to know him and I found him to be a very decent and honest man, even though he sees things as a soldier, and one would expect that. But anyway, we had become friends, and the staff, my staff, had phoned the general and said, General, the police are going to lock up Mr. Keith. To which the general said, tell him not to worry. If he gets locked up, I will send the army down and get him out. It's the first time that I've had an army and the protection of an army to get myself out of a sticky spot with the police. As it turned out, the jail did not beckon, the army did not come down, but the fact that General Ceku was ready to send them in and get me out was very comforting. As it's coming up to Christmas, the other thing that I found very amusing is quite often very serious people get into debates about how intolerant we are, societies should recognize those who are of different faith and so on and so forth. Well, Kosovo is 98% Muslim. And one of the things that I wasn't sure about, and I didn't want to offend my staff, and I said to them, would you like to celebrate Christmas? Do you want to decorate the office? And what do you do? Oh yes, please, they said. Well, I had a little bit of money in the budget, so I said, well, off you go, get a few decorations. And off I went. I came back later in the day and there had been hectic activity, and I walked in and there was more ribbon, more baubles, more Christmas decorations, more tinsel than you could shake a stick at. There was a Christmas tree, there was absolutely everything. And you understand I've never been to a brothel, but that's the way I think that an inside of a brothel would look like. It was decorated to the hilt. and this in a Muslim country. And I walked out later that day and they sort of laughed at me and said, you know, Mr. Keith, we don't really worry about these things. We celebrate Christmas and we enjoy it even though we're Muslims. And sure enough, outside the main hotel, the Europa Hotel, there was a nativity scene, quite a large one, put there by the city. And around the corner was a mini moke, one of those sort of open jeeps that you find at the seaside. Whenever we're allowed to go to the seaside, the people travel around it. And around the corner came the mini moke, with music blaring, jingle bells and carols and so on and so forth, and with a Father Christmas yelling out, Merry Christmas, have a happy time, and so on and so forth. It took me aback. The one thing that you expect in a Muslim country is that they don't celebrate Christmas. My goodness me, in Kosovo, it was a Christmas to remember. It was terrific. And we had several parties, initiated, I may say, by my Muslim staff and not by me, although I'm always good for a party. So, out of jail, courtesy of the General, Christmas in a Muslim country with mini mokes, Father Christmases, nativity scenes, and an office looking like a brothel. Doodle pip. This is a bit of a departure for Mirador, but we're going to have a half hour of music for this Sunday evening. I'm sitting in St. Michael's Church in the middle of Lewes. Actually, it's on High Street, and it's been the church for nigh on 1,000 years for the parish of Lewes, which is very small. In fact, there are only about 3 of us who actually are on the church roll that are residents of the town. But it was, historically, it is recorded as being 1140, but some historians say it was the castle church. So it was here very shortly after the Normans took over, and some people date it as early as 1080. And there's some merit to that because the priory, which you'll see in a few minutes as we do some song, the priory was started to build in 1086. So they very swiftly did build churches and priories and so on after the Norman conquest of 1066. Anyway, this is what is lovingly known as a high church. It's Anglo-Catholic. It's a beautiful church. It's an ancient church, and it has a magnificent musical director in Nick Houghton, who inspired me to do this by giving me some music from the Lewes singers, and you'll hear in a little while. But what we're going to do, first of all, is kick off with Dandelion Charm, a duo out of New Haven, Claire and John Fowler, magnificent voices. You may have heard them if you've watched any programs on Mirador. Here they are, Claire and John, Dandelion Charm.
It's a tightrope walk on an ice age honey, and you can play a game, but it won't be funny for long. She's high, she's a skywalker, doesn't matter, just focus your mind on the wire ahead, it doesn't matter, it's a long way down, long way down. So you place your foot to assess the tension and convince yourself to continue knowing it's wrong. Oh, it's wrong. It's wrong. But when she's high, she's a skywalker, doesn't matter, just focus your mind on the wire ahead, it doesn't matter, it's a long way down, long way down. What a spectacular performance. Will there will be no net for her? Such a spectacular performance. Who's going to play her throne this time? Oh, Skywalker, this time. Oh, Skywalker.
But when she's high, she's a skywalker.
Skywalker.
Just focus your mind on the wire ahead. It doesn't matter.
Skywalker.
Balancing high above the world tonight.
Skywalker. Again. Oh, again. Oh.
The next singer you may also have heard, Yeva Sriyan, who is Armenian. What does that have to do with Lewis? Well, it doesn't really, except that I've travelled extensively in Armenia, and it was the first country in the world to embrace Christianity as a state religion, and that goes back to about 600 AD. and they have some magnificent churches. They have their own version of the Vatican, and all so that you can see Mount Ararat as a backdrop. It's quite magnificent, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But the Armenians, particularly Yeva's sister, Astrid, has been very kind to me over the years, and she was the lady that pointed me in the direction of her sister and said she's got a magnificent voice, and I sometimes write some of the words. Do you think you could take a listen? And I did, and I was absolutely bowled over. Now, I've been very irreligious, and I should take my hat off while I'm in church, but let's go to Yeva and listen to her golden voice.
He never bring you down or leave you alone. Trust him all in all, 'cause he's the light. He'll lead your way through darkest of times. He'll never let you go. And he'll be there for you. And he'll be there for you. He'll never bring you down or leave you alone. Trust him all in all, 'cause he's the light. And he leads your way through darkest of times. He never lets you go. And he'll be there for you.
I look a bit uncomfortable because I'm propped up against the pulpit while I'm doing this, and sometimes you can see the beauty of the church in the background, and sometimes you've just got my shoulders, and that's a pity, really. But we'll show some pictures of St. Michael's as we go along in this programme. It was my wife's favourite church. She was very active in it, and sadly, she departed from us about 3 years ago, and we had a Requiem Mass here. And it was a magnificent occasion, a quite wonderful service. But mostly, the church was lit up by flowers, wonderful, wonderful flowers. And here are just a little look at some of them before we go to our next artist, and that is the Lewis Singers. The Lewis Singers, directed by Nick Houghton, who is the director of music here and plays the organ each Sunday, but also organises magnificent concerts in this church, really worthwhile coming to. There was an organist before him who also sadly passed away called Don Bishop, who was still playing the organ at age 90 for the Lewis Old Grammar School, who hold their assemblies in this church. And Don could make that organ sing, and it's good to know that we've got Nick to follow on, because he makes it sing as well. So let's listen to some of the music that he directs with the Lewis Singers.
Yes, chance to see. I'm actually pulling it out a little bit. Once again, let's try it. Tomorrow, 1, 2, 3.
Tomorrow shall be my dancing day. I put my whole love.
Get dancing day, later. Dancing day. Once again, tomorrow, 2, 3, 4.
Tomorrow shall be my dancing day. I put my true love.
That was perfect. That was the first time. Second verse. What are the words? Then was I born. 1, 2, 3.
Then was I born of the Virgin pure, of her I took flesh is of stars, thus was I knit to that angel to call my true love to my God, sing, oh my love, oh my love, my love, my love, this have I done for my true love.
Some of you who are new to Mirador may be slightly bemused about Sir Genry and Edward Stick. Here's Edward Stick in all his finery, although when he's in mufti he looks a bit rawer than that, made of pure wood. Edward Stick is my stick that I use when I walk around the Priory. I have Parkinson's, and there are a number of other worthy people who have Parkinson's: Billy Connolly, Michael J. Fox, Kid Jensen, the Radio 1 DJ in the 70s and the 80s, and Neil Diamond declared that he got it the other day too. There are a number, and of course Muhammad Ali was probably the most famous person to have it. So it strikes the very famous, except that it struck me, and I'm not very famous at all. But I think one of the things that you have to do is to keep going. You have to keep a good sense of humour, a good determination to do things. That's why you've got this awful television program. And that way, there is a way towards helping people with Parkinson's. There is another way that we've discovered, and that is that there's something in champagne that helps with Parkinson's. And I have started to try and persuade the NHS that they should give us Dom Perignon on prescription. Haven't got very far yet, but write to them and say, champagne for Hayes, help with Parkinson's. Okay, here we go, again with Dandelion Charm.
And he said, sing, canary, sing. If you're good, then I might let you in to the passion that burns in my heart. That's just the start, but I won't give you everything. Sing, canary, sing. If you're good, then I might let you in to
Sing, canary, sing. My hatred caresses your skin.
I'm going to go back to another song from the Lewis Singers now, before we finish off with Ivan. And I should tell you about this church. Tom Paine was married in this church, and lots of people say, who's Tom Paine? Not well known here, although very well known in the United States, because he actually is credited with starting the American Revolution. He was here as a customs agent, he was married in this church, and wrote something called The Rights of Man in Lewis, and then went off to the United States and practiced it, and they loved it. Bill Bryson, the historian, says that Tom Paine coined the term, the United States, and also that he said we should be governed, when we were actually governed by royalty at that particular time, that there should be a place called the House of Commons. Well, those are two names that ring a bell, aren't they? And Tom Paine was married here. I don't think he's a very nice man, actually, but nonetheless, a very powerful man. And he managed to get things going so that there was indeed a revolution of several sorts in both the UK and in the US. Anyway, we're going to the Lewis Singers now, and I hope you enjoy. I've been a journalist most of my life. I've been in Northern Ireland for 15 years at the height of the Troubles. I went to Kosovo and spent a couple of years, and in Sarajevo for a year, and in Bucharest for a year in Romania. I've been to Russia. I've been all over practicing journalism and training journalists. So I'm a bit of a wanderer, and you meet awfully nice people when you're going around the world. And two of the nicest were Mary and Clive Shorthouse, who lived in Lewes but now live in New Haven. And
Clive really is one of the most eccentric people I've ever come across, and he's just lovable. And the family have looked after me for a good many years, and very kind they are. But Clive and I once had a cake in our care for a raffle, and we decided to try it, and we scoffed the whole lot, only to be told by the lady who had donated the cake that she would want to see the thing raffled. So we had to scatter around Lewis looking for a cake that looked vaguely like the one that we'd scoffed, and we couldn't remember really what it was like. Anyway, that's Clive. But the one thing that Clive and Mary do have is they have 3 very talented daughters. Fleur is a storyteller, a professional storyteller, a very good one. Charlotte is a classical singer, and Claire, with John, is Dandelion Charm. So there you are. That is the Shorthouse family. They're almost like the Von Trapps. Let's get on with it, and now let's hear the last word from Yeva.
Cister peres bարձրացնում Տալիս ես թևեր, որ թրջեմ ինչպես արծիվը Գութը քո հավերժ է Տեր Սերը քո մեծ անսահման է Sen
Well, they've got me kneeling down for this last little bit, but after all, it is church, isn't it? So just to end this evening's musical extravaganza, I hope you've enjoyed it. It's not something we will do regularly, but we're going to do it from time to time because there's a lot of musical talent in Lewis. So, yeah, just to say goodbye, and I'm glad that you joined us. By the way, this is Edward Stick in mufti. For those who haven't followed Edward Stick and Sir Genery. Sir Genery, by the way, I don't think I explained earlier, is the sculpture of a medieval helmet of a knight at the fort in the Battle of Lewes in 1964. And we named him Genery, or Sir Genery, because in those days the name John and Henry were prevalent, so we've combined them to call him Genery. He's got his own Facebook page, he's got his own fan club, and he presents his own programme on Mirador. So I hope that you'll visit Sir Genery and perhaps understand who he is, because he talks regularly about Lewis history to Edward Stick. Edward Stick, Esquire. There he is. Okay, well that's it. One thing I can now depart. I'm going to put my hat back on. Feel almost undressed without it. I'll say cheerio. Toodle-pip.
I have no idea. This keeps on flipping off. This is a sort of issue that we've had to face and to try to overcome. That's a new one on me, is why the microphone keeps on switching off. But at least we know about it, and we can do something about it. So for the third time, let me tell you, because I'm sure that you see my lips moving, let me tell you that tomorrow we will be back to normal. We will start at 8:30 with the news headlines. We go on to Stuart Dolby at 10 with Stuart in conversation. And tomorrow he's got a conversation about the state of politics in Lewis. And then at 11 o'clock, we've got John Henty, his usual buoyant self, with lots of interesting information about local famous people, or people that have come out of the locality and become famous in the entertainment industry, but also some of the vignettes, some of the little stories that emanate out of Lewis. And John will be there to be here. I sit by him, I'm his top banana, I grin and I nod and I wave my arms a bit, but he does the talking. So you've got both of those tomorrow, and on Thursday we've got the alternative view with Liza Page, which always gets a lot of you watching, and quite rightly so. She's very controversial and calls a spade a shovel, and it's half hour or so worth watching. So that's what I started to say was that Kevin has got the beer sorted for the week, and I'm always the official taster, so I get to taste it before the sun is over the yard arm. Although it's pretty damn close this morning. What is the time now? It's 11:45. Not that too soon before the yard arm, but still an early drink. Yes, it's okay. And let's try this one. Yes, that's okay too. I think that one is Amstel and the other is Kronenberg. And they're both tasting good. So whichever you want, they're on the bar menu today. We have sorted out a couple of the technical problems this morning. There's still more to go, but hopefully things will be much smoother, and you'll actually get a better picture, and you'll actually see a few things a little better and without interruption from now on. Famous last words, but let's hope that they just remain famous and that they're not the last words. I'm Keith Hayes. This is Mirador Television, broadcasting out of the White Hart Hotel in Lewes. We are local, not parochial, and we are the biggest little television station in the world. And we're right in your community. So join us each day, starting at 8:30 in the morning. Until tomorrow, this is Keith Hayes with you with a collage of programs this morning, and hopefully you enjoyed a bit of some of them. Until tomorrow, toodle, 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 pip.